Daf Chesam at base, 4 lines from the top. We learned previously a three-way machloikis, the kohen gadol before Yom Kippur that you're malfish, the kohen that you serve the parah, they're mazen, they sprinkle with him with the waters of the meichatas. According to Reb Meir, on both cases it's all 7 days. According to Reb Chanina Skana Kahanim, it's only the kohen that serves the parah that's 7 days. The kohen gadol before Yom Kippur is only on the 3rd and 7th day. Yossi says that both are on the 3rd and 7th day. Now the Gemara analyzes why should we say that you why should we say rather you sprinkle all 7 days? If a person is Tomei Tumeis, the Tara procedure is that the sprinkling with the waters of the Mechatas occur on the 3rd day after the Tumah, the 3rd day after the occurrence of the Tumah, and the 7th day. So why would you sprinkle all 7 days? So what would be the reason for that? Why would we say that you do it in both cases? Why would we say that you burn it all 7 days? Now, if you want to say that the Hazab is Mana Mitzvah, that just like Tefillah is Mana Mitzvah, Hazab is Mana Mitzvah, meaning therefore we want to make sure the Hazab takes place on the 3rd day after the Tumah, the 7th day after the Tumah. So I understand that you do the Hazal, the sprinkling on the 1st day, because maybe this is in fact the 3rd day from the time you became Tumah. So Bishlo Rishon Shema Shlishi, Sheni Shema Shlishi, the 2nd day of his Afrasha, of his sequestering. Again, that could be the 3rd day he was Tumah prior to the sequestering, could be the 3rd day of his Tumah. Shlishi Shema Shlishi. On the 3rd day of his sequestering, maybe it's the 3rd day of his Tumah. Maybe he became Tumah right before they sequestered him. Now we understand also Chamishi Shema Shvi. Now you have to do the Hazal with a 4-day interval. Then on the 5th day, well, if the first day that we did the Hazal was in fact the 3rd day of his Tumah, 4 days later is the 5th day, then that would be the 7th day of his Tumah. So we understand Chamishi Shema Shvi, Shishi Shema Shvi. The 6th day of his sequestering is, well, if the 2nd day of his sequestering was really the 3rd day of his Tumah, the 4 days later is the 6th day, and that's perhaps the 7th day of his Tumah. Shvi Shema Shvi. And the 7th day of his sequestering, maybe that's the 7th day of his Tumah, because perhaps they became Tomei right before the sequestering. Maybe the 3rd day of his Hafrasha, of his separation, is the 3rd day of the Tumah, 4 days later is the 7th. So we understand why, if you hold that Hazab is Mana Mitzvah, that we would do it on all of these times. El Ravia Lamali Hazal Klal. But the 4th day of his sequestering, the 4th day cannot be, in any event, it cannot be the 3rd day after his Tumah, it cannot be the 7th day. So why would we need Hazal on the 4th day? So why would we say that? There's no possibility that it's either the 7th or the 3rd or the 7th day of his Tumah. Even according to you, Hazal Kol Shiva Me'ika, it says that we do Hazal all 7 days. Is it possible that we do Hazal all 7 days? But Kaimlan, we hold that Hazal Shvus Ve'ena Deichaz Shabbos. We learned in the Mishnah Psachim that Hazal is a Shvus, and it's not Deichaz Shabbos. You don't do Hazal on Shabbos. Rashi explains that Hazal is like being Masakin. It's Midrabanan, it's a din d'Rabbanan that it has an appearance of a misakin, of fixing the person, repairing him. So it has an appearance of a malach. So the Rabbanan were geyser not to do hazah, because since that's what does the Tahara form, it has the appearance of misakin, and they were geyser not to do hazah on Shabbos. Miri points out that it's much from the Gemara that it's exer that he might come to carry the water. He says, in fact, that there's both reasons, and Ein Tzlach explains why both reasons are given. But Kol Panim, we know that Hazal Shvus is not Deichaz Shabbos, so it can't be literally that when you say we do the Hazal all 7 days, it means each and every one of the 7 days, because you don't do it on Shabbos. What must you say? Shiva lebar mishabbos. You mean 7 days with the exception of Shabbos. Achaname Shiva lebar meravi. It means 7 with the exception of the 4th day. So it doesn't mean literally all 7 days. It means that within this period of time, the entire period of sequestering has hazos, but if it's on the 4th day, it's not needed, and on Shabbos also it's not. Amar Rabbi Hilkach, he says, therefore, Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim. He says, Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, Dolei b'Didan Tal Yom Milsa. It's not up to us to determine it. Yom Kippur is on the 10th day of Tishrei. We cannot adjust that. And the Hafrasha takes 7 days beforehand. So we cannot manipulate the dates. So Ela b'Kividi Yachad Tal Yom Milsa, it's totally on the time of the fixing of the dates of the moon, of the being Mekadosh the Chodesh. So therefore, therefore, in any event, we have to do the Hafrasha, the sequestering, on the 3rd day of Tishrei, which is 7 days before Yom Kippur. And wherever it turns out, whatever day of the week that turns out to be, so be it. Meaning, because it's 7 days before Yom Kippur is the 10th day of Tishrei. The 3rd day of Tishrei, whenever that turns out, whichever day of the week it turns out to be, then that's, so be it, we can't change that. Therefore, if it turns out that the 4th day of the sequestering is not Shabbos, it'll turn out that there are 2 days that you don't do the Hazah. It's the 4th day and Shabbos. And we can't change that. Aval Kayan Sefer Sapara, but in the case of the Kayan Sefer Sapara, to be done Tal Yom Milsa, there's no set time. We can determine, it's up to us to determine when we want the burning of the parah to take place. And therefore we can choose the day of the week, and we can choose therefore the 7 days, what will be 7 days prior. So therefore, the B'didan Tal Yom Milsa, since it's dependent on us, Mafrashim Libervi B'Shabbos. So therefore, we sequester him on Wednesday. Why do we do that? So that it'll turn out that the 4th day is also Shabbos. So therefore, we don't have to miss 2 days where you don't do Hazah. You can work it out, therefore, that the 4th day falls out on Shabbos. So therefore, it's only 1 day that you don't do the Hazah, because it's both the Revi and on Shabbos is the same day. So therefore, you only have to omit 1 day of the sprinkling of the Hazah. The question arises, according to Chanina Skan Kahanim, he holds that the sprinkling all 7 days was only done for the kind of service of parah, but on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur, the sprinkling was only done on the 3rd and 7th days. And in fact, the Rambam paskins that way. So according to that, if either the 3rd day or the 7th day falls out on Shabbos, you can't do the Hazah. It'll turn out that you're only doing the Hazah once. Now, there's no purpose to do Hazah once. Hazah has to be done twice, on the 3rd day and the 7th day. So therefore, according to that, according to the Rambam, you don't do Hazah at all for the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, because since you can't do the Hazah on one of the days, there's no purpose to do Hazah only once. Therefore, you don't do it at all. The Teitz Rin, however, says in that case, we are mafreshim a day earlier in order to avoid that problem. So the Mishnah says, the Mishnah said, that we separate the Kohen Gadol, we sequester him to the Lishkas Parhedron. That was the name of the office of the chamber that he was sequestered into. Tanya, we learn in the Brisa, Rabbi Yehuda says, V'chi Lishkas Parhedron. So was it called Lishkas Parhedron? Was that the name of it? Baloi Lishkas Balvoti. It was called the Lishka of a Balvoti. Balvoti is a Lishka. Balvoti means chashuv, prominent, aristocrats, chashuv people. Parhedron means more of the menial task, officers that did the menial task. Balvoti are aristocrats who had high positions. Parhedron had lower positions, and Parhedron typically had lower offices. They were officers of lower rank, and they were changed more frequently. So was the name of the chamber, was it called Lishkas Parhedron? It was called Lishka Balvoti, referring to Chashivas. Ella, he explains, B'tchilei Akar Naisa Lishka Balvoti. Initially, when the Kohen Gadol was chashuv, and they were they were tzaddikim, and they were aristocrats, then the lishka that they were sequestered into was given an appropriate name. It was called Lishkas Balvati. But later, in later times, then at the time of the second base Mikdash, the time of Shimon HaTzadik, they went down in stature, and they used to pay money to be able to become the Kohen Gadol. And they were appointed not based on their merit, but on basis of being paid for the position. So therefore, when we talk they gave it a different name, and these Kohanim Gadol were changed regularly. Every 12 months they were changed, a new Kohen Gadol. So it was similar to a Parhedrin, which was a lower rank, that also were changed very regularly. So since the Machlifin Oisel Kol Shnei Asar Chodesh, Parhedrin, like Parhedrin, these type of officers that the king used to change and rotate regularly every 12 months. So they gave it a more appropriate name to reflect the stature of the Kohen Gadol at that time, and they called it Lishkas Parhedrin. So now the Gemara is going to bring down a Mishnah that also has another reference to Parhedrin. Tanan Hosa. We learned in the Mishnah, so the Mishnah says, this is discussing the din of Demai. So it's a Mishnah in Demai. It says, Hanachtumim, bakers, lo yechivu oism chacham l'hafresh al trumas meiser v'chala. They only obligated them from Demai to be mafresh, trumas meiser, and chala. So what is the Indian over here is by Demai, by Demai, Chachamim saw that, as we'll see in the Gemara, and continue the next Amud, the Chachamim saw that the Amei Haratzim were not that careful. At a certain point in time, were not that careful to be mafresh the meisters. Truma Gedoyla, they were careful, but meisters they were not. So therefore, the Chachamim was saying, you buy something from an Amaretz, you have to be mafresh meisters, not Truma Gedoyla, but meisters. Now, they didn't, by Meiser Rishon, they did not obligate the person to give it to the Levi. It was not Meiser Ani, he also was not obligated to give it to the Ani. He could keep it for himself. Meiser Sheni, he was obligated to go and take it to Yerushalayim. And the Trubas Meiser, he was also obligated to be mafresh and give to a Kohen. The Chachamim made a certain dispensation and a kula for the bakers, and they were makel on them. And they said that the Meiser Sheni, that they're not obligated to take up to Yerushalayim, because the Parhedrin, and this is the connection over here, the Parhedrin, the officers that were in charge, used to pressure them to sell it to them at very low prices, and there was a big hardship. So the Chamul Mekel for the Nachtumim, that they did not have to be mafresh the Meiser Sheni to take it up to Yerushalayim. Chala, regarding Chala, really, that doesn't really relate to Demai per se. They were mechayiv them for Chala and to be mafresh Trumas Meiser. They weren't mechayiv them for Meiser Sheni, but Trumas Meiser they were. And Chala does not really relate to the Demai per se, because the chiyuv of Chala takes place after the flour is kneaded into dough, and there's at that point there is a chiyuv of hafrasha of Chala. So the Chala would not have been an obligation for the Amaretz anyway. We're talking where the baker buys the grain from the Amaretz. He didn't have a chiyuv of Chala at that point anyway. But this is brought in Agav. He has a chiyuv of Chala because the chiyuv starts with the Nachlam. He has a chiyuv of Trumas Meiser, but he does not have a chiyuv of to be mad to Meiser Sheni to bring it to Yerushalayim because of the Parhedrin.